Thanks for listening to the Good Enough Wellness Podcast. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Emily.
And we're passionate about holistic wellness that real people with real lives can achieve.
We see you out there striving for perfection, but we want you to know that good enough can be good enough.
Before we get started, everything we talk about in this show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Always talk to your healthcare provider before making any changes to your diet, lifestyle, medication, or supplements. You're listening to episode number 13, Intro to Macronutrients. In this episode, we'll be discussing what macronutrients are, what they do, and why you should care.
But first, don't forget about our brand new Patreon community. We're super excited about it. It's totally free to join. We'll be having our show notes over there, discussions, and hopefully some bonus content at some point. It's a great way to get involved and show us some support, and we can't wait to see you over there.
Yeah, you should come join us. So, Emily, what have you been nerding out about this week?
I think I've been nerding out about the same thing you have based on our messenger history.
Yes.
We both just got done listening to The Comfort Crisis. And first of all, audiobooks are fantastic because you can go do adult things and do your chores and stuff and still listen to things. But Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, it was very good.
Yes.
We had frantic conversations back and forth via messenger about oh my gosh, I never thought about this before. Mm-hmm. I feel like it comes with some caveats where we definitely didn't have the same worldview as the author, but that's okay. There were still lots of really good things to glean from it. What did you get out of that?
Yeah, I listened to it, I think, maybe a month or two ago.
Oh, okay.
So, but I was really pushing. I was like, you really need to listen to this because I knew that you would really enjoy it. And same as you, I had some caveats and some things that I was like, I don't know if that's necessarily applicable to everybody in real life. But I thought it was a great eye-opening book about how soft we've gotten and how discomfort can be a catalyst for health, and that's mental health and physical health. He talks about everything from surviving cold temperatures to thinking about death and all the things that we find uncomfortable that we try to avoid as much as possible, and how thinking about them head on can really change our mental health and our physical health.
Yeah, it gave me really good food for thought. And just real quick, probably one of the biggest takeaways I got was about screen time.
Yeah.
And we all know that screen time is bad for you. Social media may not be the best choice for you, blah, blah, blah. We know all this, right? But I think I had a view of social media and screen time as it was brain dead time. You're not using it, you're not engaging your brain, it's bad for you to be lazy, blah, blah. But his takeaway about screen time and social media wasn't that. It was that it actually doesn't give your brain rest. Mm-hmm. And your brain needs boredom to be restored. Yeah. It needs the rest time. So it's not that you're being brain dead by being on screens and social media. It's actually that you're not getting the rest you need.
Yeah.
And boredom actually equals rest and restoration. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this episode, we're going to talk about macronutrients. And so before we jump into that, we'll just talk about what macronutrients are, and that is protein, fat, and carbohydrates.
You probably know them as macros.
Yes. Yep. There are myriad diets about macros. But most foods have a mixture of all three. Sometimes there's mostly two, but very rarely do we find something that is all one macronutrient. That's not very common. Most foods have a little bit of all of them, with one primary standout macronutrient that identifies it as part of that group.
So when we're talking about protein, we're talking about anything with a mother, which is just a lovely way to put it. I love that you put that in our notes. So beef, chicken, pork, fish, turkey. And I think we've discussed before that there is some protein in plants, but that is not what that plant is going to identify with. Like, it's not going to be the main thing you find in a plant,
Yeah.
except for maybe like tofu, but I feel like that's another discussion for another day.
Yeah. Soy is a very complicated topic.
It is complicated, nuanced, if you will.
Yeah.
So tell me, why do we love protein?
We love protein because it's the actual building blocks of our body. You know, this is what builds, where we get the materials to build cells, tissues, organs, nerves, bones, hair, teeth, skin, nails, enzymes, hormones, muscles, antibodies, hemoglobin, neurotransmitters. If it exists in your body is building it from protein. And you can't expect to have any well-functioning anything without providing the building blocks.
Yeah, that sounds pretty important. That's probably why we're talking about it first, huh?
Yeah. Well, and I think it gets forgotten a lot. I mean, maybe not so much now. It's kind of getting its time in the sun. But in the past, protein has kind of been pushed to the wayside with the greater conversation being around fat and carbohydrates.
Right. Well, and the thing is like you don't need to be trying to get the gains or be a gym bro to like protein. Like, you need, if you are alive and breathing, you need protein.
Yes. General rule of thumb for protein is you need about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. So, like, if you think about that, you know, a 120-pound person needs about 120 grams of protein, and if you ever have tracked any kind of food, you'll realize that it can be kind of hard to get to 100 grams of protein even.
That's definitely something that took practice on my end to, like, get up to seeing the kind of protein numbers I was looking for. It just figuring out, like, what do I like to eat? What has a lot of protein? What kind of meal look like to get me to that, like, 30-ish grams of protein?
Yeah.
It's kind of a learning curve.
Yep. I have started, like, building my plate by putting the protein on it first because I am, I think I've talked about this before, I'm a potato lover, so if there's any kind of potatoes, I tend to put that on my plate first because that's what I want.
Which is fair.
And then I'm like, oh, I don't have much room for my protein, but I've started, like, putting the protein on first, and then I'm like, well, after I eat this, I'm not going to have much room for anything else.
Or
so,
even, like, kind of parenting yourself and being like, I got to eat my meatballs first before I get into...
Which, pro tip, actually eating your protein before your carbohydrates can be really helpful if you have blood sugar regulation issues.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
So next in our macro lineup is usually fat, and examples of fat would be anything tallow, lard, butter, schmaltz, oils, that sort of thing. We love a good solid fat.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good indication of, like, a saturated fat is something that gets hard. We both cook with a lot of butter and a lot of tallow and a lot of lard, that sort of thing, but schmaltz is great too. Also, you have oils, so we're talking avocado oil, olive oil, linseed oil. I don't know, what else are there? There's flaxseed oil,
even canola oil.
Canola oil is a fat, of course. Anything saturated, unsaturated.
Yes, there's like two groups. So there's saturated fat and unsaturated fat.
I went to say that and then it sounded wrong. I was like, do we really just say this kind and this kind?
Yeah.
I guess we do.
And then when we have unsaturated fats, there's two different kinds of unsaturated fats. And we have monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. And what makes a fat saturated or unsaturated is the chemical bonds between the atoms. And I'm not going to get real sciencey on you, but the more bonds that there are in the molecule, the more unsaturated it is. So saturated fat kind of like looks like a rectangle or like a line.
Okay.
It's super dense. That's what makes it hard at room temperature.
Oh, fascinating. I mean, that makes sense.
Yes. So once something is unsaturated, then it starts to have like these kinks, these bonds that are like, now you have like legs coming off of the structure. the more bonds there are, the more unsaturated it is. So monounsaturated fat is something like olive oil, and it only has one bond. Polyunsaturated has many bonds, and the more unsaturated it gets, the less stable it gets, because that structure starts to look gnarly instead of like a firm line. And so when we think about different fats inside of our bodies, we can think of saturated fats as being very solid, and since they help to build our cell membranes, we want to have a mixture of both, because we need things to be able to get in and out of our cells. So there needs to have some fluidity. So we need some of those unsaturated bonds in order to create a little bit of fluidity.
Right.
But we also need a lot of saturation, so that way there is some structure to the cells and they're not just all fluid.
Loosey-goosey.
Yes. We need to be able to keep toxins out and keep nutrients in as well. So some saturation is needed to create that nice rigid cell structure.
Yeah, I think it's good that you talked about both, because there's definitely, in our Western culture, we have a lot of polyunsaturated. Mm-hmm. We talk about PUFAs a lot. If you've ever heard somebody say like, oh, PUFAs, like, yeah, be careful.
Yeah.
And while it's true, we do prefer a saturated fat, these solid fats. We need more of them. You cannot have a completely polyunsaturated fat-free diet.
Yes.
Not only is it like impossible, but also you do need some of them.
Yep. Yeah, and the issue is like, you'll see people say, you don't need these polyunsaturated fats, get them out of your diet, they're so bad, they're evil. But the real issue is that we're just eating them in a higher ratio than we ever have before.
Right.
Traditionally it was like anywhere from 1:1 to 1:4 saturated to unsaturated fats, and now we're eating things like 1:40.
Yeah.
And it's just like our cell structure needs to have more saturation than that.
Right. So let's be aware of them, but you don't need to like, oh my gosh, I can't eat this because
right.
It has some PUFAs in it.
Yeah, and note about the seed oils, even though they're like, it's not evil to have a polyunsaturated fat, just be aware that most seed oils you find on the shelf are already rancid. They've been washed in detergents to make them clear, and since they are so unstable, if they're exposed to oxygen, heat, or light, they start to break down and can cause oxidative damage to your cells. So if you are consuming a polyunsaturated fat, it is best to get them like from a cold pressed, in the cold pressed form. You can find them in the refrigerator, or like eat them in the whole foods form. So if you want to have some polyunsaturated fats, it might be better to have some raw sunflower seeds rather than sunflower seed oil.
Right, yes.
So why we love fat is because we've already talked a little bit about this. It's important for cell structure. But some other things that are really cool about fat, it's really helpful for balancing blood sugar. It can kind of slow the rise of blood glucose, so that way you're not getting a big spike and a drop. It's important for hormone creation. Most of our hormones are created from cholesterol. It's important for energy production because of the blood sugar component there. And it's an important cofactor for vitamins. We have fat-soluble vitamins that we need, and those are A, D, E, and K. It provides satiety and increases nutrient absorption.
So that brings us to carbohydrates, or carbs for short, because we love her. And you guys know carbs. We're talking about anything that grows in the ground, fruits, vegetables, grains, or underground like potatoes. Yes, all good things. So tell us, why do we love carbs aside from the fact that they're freaking delicious?
I think about this sometimes. I'm like, why did God make carbs so delicious if they were so bad for us? Just doesn't make any sense.
What a mystery.
So why we love carbohydrates? They provide energy. Sugar is energy. They are the preferred fuel source of the brain and the muscles. They're a source of fiber. They actually increase the availability of tryptophan for better melatonin production and better sleep. They are very important for cell-to-cell communication. They help control blood glucose, and they participate in cholesterol and triglyceride metabolism. So if you want to be able to use your fat for fuel, you do need some carbohydrates.
All super important.
Yeah.
So those are our protein, fats, and carbs, just in a nutshell. Hopefully kept that concise. But now you gotta build a plate. You take this knowledge
do something
and
with it.
Yeah, and then you gotta put it into a meal. So we were discussing how we wanted to talk about this because we can't come on a podcast and say you should eat this many carbs and you should eat this many.
Right.
Really, the only thing that we would ever say about hard numbers, and even that's a little iffy, is like aim for those 30 grams of protein. That's just a good like baseline for most people. Some people can do more. Some people are still working their way up to it, and that's okay.
That's 30 grams of protein per meal.
Oh, yeah.
Per day.
Per meal. Yeah. Did I say per day?
No.
Oh,
you
I just
said
didn't.
Work up to the 30 grams of protein. And I was like, we better specify
My
that's
friend,
per
if you're
meal.
getting 30 grams of protein a day,
You would be surprised how many people do.
oh, I'm scared.
Their poor bodies.
Yeah, seriously. Mental health and physical health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you mentioned like roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is a great approximate place to start. A little bit more, a little bit less. It just depends what you're doing. But then where it gets a little more like, this really just depends, is in your fats and carbs. Mm-hmm. And I know you got some percentages for us, and I think this is going to prove what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
some bodies prefer carbohydrates for fuel. Some bodies prefer fat for fuel. Different stages call for different needs. And so, like, general rule of thumb, we look at like 22 to 40% of your calories coming from carbohydrates, 28 to 58% coming from fat, and 19 to 35% coming from protein.
And those are really wide ranges.
Yeah.
So you can see
have
where...
to tweak.
Yeah, you do. You have to tweak. You got to just kind of see how you feel on things. And I think we have a little bit of troubleshooting ideas for you. I know we talked about if you're getting really sleepy after a meal, you may have too many carbs and not enough protein, one or the other, or both.
Yeah.
And what are some other things you can look for when you're troubleshooting your macro ratios?
So I think if you might need more protein if your daily consumption is less than 1 gram per pound of body weight. You might need more if you're really active. So if you're like hitting the gym, or if you're trying to gain muscle. So if you're someone who's like actively trying to get stronger, you're going to need more protein probably.
Right. Good points.
You might need more carbs if you struggle with anxiety or depression, if you have fertility or period struggles, if you feel dissatisfied after eating and you crave sweets. So like a lot of people, like after they're done, they're like, I feel like I need something sweet now. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good indication that you might need some more carbohydrates. Like the ratio needs to go up a little bit more. And you might need more fat if you get hungry less than 3 hours after a meal. So you really want to be able to eat enough like heavy foods, so like fatty foods, to go 3 to 5 hours between your meals. Mm-hmm. You might need more fat if you have reproductive health struggles, or if you struggle with skin issues, or you're dealing with inflammation.
All good points.
So what does that look like on an ideal plate? My general rule of thumb is half a plate of carbohydrates, and this would be a mix of like starchy and non-starchy carbs. The starchy carbs like help it stick around a little bit longer, because the more simple the carbohydrate, the faster it's going to burn for fuel. So if you have a little mixture of the starchy and the non-starchy, you should have some of that immediate energy and then some energy that's going to last a little longer. And then a palm-sized portion of protein, and 1 to 2 thumb-sized portions of fat.
I know me personally, I find I don't have to try too hard to hit my fat goals, quote unquote. Usually whatever you're eating that's kind of a whole food, it's probably going to be paired with fat. Yeah. Because your protein usually comes hand in hand with fat. So unless you're just eating egg whites all day, which... You poor thing. But there's probably going to be a decent amount of fat with it. Just don't be afraid of that fat that comes with it. I find that, I know this isn't the case for everybody, but just me personally, like, I don't do fat-free yogurt. I don't do fat-free or even lower fat milk, that sort of thing. And it's not even in the moment thing. It's like over the course of the day or a couple days, I find I am looking for ice cream and I'm looking for butter and I'm looking for, not that there's anything wrong with those things. It would be cheaper and put me farther ahead to just go ahead and keep the fat in with what I'm eating.
Yeah, if you find that you're like craving like really heavy, like potato chips, well, sometimes potato chips can be a salt thing too, but like if you find like you're looking for those like heavier, fattier foods because you're like, I am hungry, that might be a good indication you need more fat. And I was going to say, like, 1 to 2 thumb-sized portions of fat doesn't mean, like, you add, like, a tablespoon of olive oil on top of your meal.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be, like, your cooking fat or involved in if you're having chicken thighs, it'll be, like, skin on chicken thighs. Like, that is chicken fat. So you don't necessarily have to add fat to your meals all the time, but just be aware of like how much fat could be in that meal.
Right. So we talked about what the macros are. We talked about what that might look like on our plate, but why? Why do I need all 3? Why can't I skip out on the carbs to lose a little belly or that sort of thing? Or, I mean, protein is expensive. Why do I need to be spending money on it?
So the answer is really simple as to why we need all 3 at every meal or snack. And that's 1, to balance blood sugar, and 2, so you get a steady flow of protein. I was thinking about this and I was like, why is it important to get that steady flow of protein? And really, if you need at least 100 grams of protein a day, no one I know wants to save all that for dinner. 100 grams of protein is going to be a lot to eat all at once. So if you're really working hard to get it at every meal, by the end of the day, you'll have all of the protein you need for all the building blocks, and you won't be eating a bag of rotisserie chicken to try to get your 100 grams of protein for the day.
To be fair, though, I feel like I could eat a bag of rotisserie chicken.
So put that in your back pocket for when you need
but not
make
literally.
Up your protein. Yeah, so balancing blood sugar is so important, and having all 3 at every meal and snack makes sure that our blood sugar does not spike or fall, which would then call on stress hormones, creating more stress in the body. It just kind of helps the blood sugar go up and down, up and down, up and down, and create a steady flow of energy. It can curb cravings, and it can also keep you from gaining unnecessary weight because you're not relying on the stress hormones and the blood sugar dysregulation to give you energy throughout the day.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure at some point we would love to do an episode or a series on fat loss and responsible fat loss, but the number one thing you can do is balance your blood sugar. That is
Absolutely.
Like step 1 for not just fat loss, but also just health in general.
Mm-hmm. So I hope you enjoyed this quick and dirty episode about macronutrients. It's by no means comprehensive. If you're interested in learning more about one of the macronutrients in particular, or all 3, you like doing a deep dive on them, let us know. And now's a great time to tell you. Don't forget to join our free Patreon community. And you can leave a comment there and let us know what you want to hear more of, and let us know like what you think of these episodes, and give us some constructive criticism, please. We're sensitive.
We will cry. But
we want to hear from you.
Please leave us comments on saying like, hey, you mentioned this one thing, can you deep dive on that for us? We would love to do that for you.
And if other things that really help us out, leave a rating or review on your podcast player and share it with your friends, family, like-minded community. We want to get the word out, and you are our catalyst.
Let's do it.
So, Emily, what's good this week?
So what's good this week is hopefully the end of we've had such a month. And I don't know if it's the weather changes. I don't know. It's just one thing after the other between ER visits, and then we kind of keep going from one illness to the next. We just haven't seemed
I hear you.
Yeah, we can't seem to get on top of it. And all at the same time, I mean, life carries on. Kids still need to like be taught their lessons in school and still go to their activities. And I just can't seem to get a leg up. But what's good is that my husband has this coworker, and he loves to cook. And lately, he loves to cook for us. And I know, I'm going to cry about it because he has like these recipes that he's perfected over the years, and he understands that we're a big family with big eaters. So it's not even like, here, we brought you a quart of soup. It's like, no, he sends home these like totes of soup and chili, and this last time it was like this like goulash, and it was so good. And it's like not even like, well, they made it and it was sweet, so we're gonna eat. No, it's like delicious. So
yeah,
Jim, you are saving my butt lately, and I really appreciate you.
We love that.
Yeah,
what
so
a great
good.
community.
It is a great community, and I love that it kind of came from unexpected places, and that's really cool.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would come from there.
So how about you? What's good this week, Kayla?
So this week I was invited to do a girls' night out event in a local town to me, so Corey, Pennsylvania, at the Salt Spa and Organic Goods. I had stopped in there earlier in the year to share about my services and get to know the owners, and really enjoyed my conversation. And they reached out to me and they were like, hey, we're doing a girls' night out event. Would you like to come and share about your services? And I was like, absolutely. So I went to that on Thursday night and had the best time. They are the sweetest people there, so kind, and I, had a really great time just sharing about my services and getting to interact with the community there, and yeah, I was super pumped and had a great time.
That's so cool. I love that. And hopefully we get to go back with you next time.
Yeah, they have a salt room there, and I was sitting there at my table, and I texted all my friends, and I was like, you want to do a salt room with me? Because
and we're all like,
so
you're there right now?
Yeah, I did actually go in the salt room eventually, but it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. How cool. Thank you for listening to the Good Enough Wellness Podcast.
To learn more about my one-on-one packages, join my mailing list and follow me on Instagram at Kayla King Wellness.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Good Enough Wellness Podcast feed wherever you listen to podcasts. You don't want to miss an episode.
Follow us on Instagram at Good Enough Wellness Podcast to learn about upcoming episodes and join our free Patreon community to interact with the Good Enough community.
The Good Enough Wellness Podcast, because good enough can be good enough.
Well, that's good enough for me.
Me too.